I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you're walking through this massive, bustling bazaar.
Okay.
But the air isn't thick with the smell of spices or roasting coffee or anything like that. Instead, every single vendor is just shouting these slogans at you.
Right, like an infomercial.
Exactly. You hear stuff like, unlock your true joy in 7 steps, or the secret to everlasting happiness revealed. And over here, you've got one stall pushing these glowing bottles of positive thinking pills, and another one is selling like monthly subscriptions to inner peace.
It sounds completely absurd.
Yeah.
Sort of like a dystopian sci-fi novel.
It really does, but the wild thing is that is exactly the marketplace we walk through every single day. I mean, on our phones, in bookstores, corporate wellness seminars, you name it.
Yeah, we're swimming in it.
We really are. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are on a mission today to completely dismantle this modern obsession with permanent joy. And we're doing that by unpacking a really provocative new book, The Happiness Scam by Sandeep Chavan. We want to show you why this endless pursuit of feeling good is, ironically, the very thing making us miserable.
And it's such a profound paradox, really, because if you look at the numbers, humanity is currently spending upwards of $40 billion every single year on self-help books, wellness retreats, meditation apps.
40 billion.
Yeah, 40 billion. And the market is projected to hit 70 billion by the end of the decade.
Wow.
Right. So we have this unprecedented access to the supposed tools of happiness. Yet when you look at the epidemiological data, global rates of depression, anxiety, profound loneliness, they're just breaking historical records.
It's not working.
No, it's not just failing, it's actively backfiring. And that's why we're going to use this framework from Chavan's book today. It's called Universal Energy Dynamics, or UED.
UED.
Okay. Yeah. And we're going to use it to prove that happiness is not a commodity you can purchase. And it is certainly not a permanent state you can achieve, no matter what that 5 a.m. routine influencer tells you.
Right, because this whole idea that happiness is something you can buy in a 30-day curriculum, it's actually a pretty new invention.
Very new.
If you look back at ancient philosophies, whether you're reading Stoicism or Buddhist texts or the Bhagavad Gita, they never promised a permanent state of euphoria.
Never. That wasn't the goal.
Exactly. They taught ways of living where joy was just this byproduct of alignment. The Stoics focused on equanimity. Buddhists focused on non-attachment. The original instruction was basically sit quietly, observe your mind, and accept the suffering.
But capitalism looked at that ancient wisdom and saw a massive marketing problem.
Right, because how do you sell that?
Exactly. You cannot monetize, sit quietly, and accept suffering.
Yeah.
That doesn't move units.
No, definitely not.
So, over the last few decades, the wellness industry essentially stripped away the philosophical nuance. They removed the acceptance of pain, and they repackaged what was left into these bite-sized, sellable commodities.
Right.
They took the lifelong practice of observing the mind and turned it into a $9.99 a month app subscription. They took the really complex psychological uncoupling of desire and turned it into, a $500 weekend manifestation masterclass.
Wow. So wisdom was basically flattened into content.
Precisely. Content was structured into a curriculum, and that curriculum became a $40 billion commerce engine.
Okay, let's unpack this because I have a macro question here.
Go for it.
If these products, the apps, the books, the seminars, if they constantly fail to deliver this permanent joy they promise, why do we keep buying them? I mean, if I buy a vacuum cleaner and it leaves dirt all over my rug, I don't go back to the store and buy 5 more vacuums from the exact same brand.
Right, you'd return it.
Exactly. So why hasn't this industry collapsed under the weight of its own failure?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the industry's success relies entirely on our dissatisfaction. The infrastructure is actually built on the weaponization of your own neurobiology.
Okay, how so?
Marketers in this space leverage something called the prediction error mechanism in your brain. When you buy that new productivity planner or you sign up for a retreat, you aren't actually buying the result. You're buying the anticipation of the result.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. The very moment of purchase triggers this massive spike of dopamine in the ventral tegmental area of your brain.
So just swiping the credit card feels good.
Exactly. It feels incredible. You feel hopeful, motivated. Now, the business model demands that the formula eventually fails, of course. But, and this is key, it has to fail slowly enough for that initial dopamine hit to forge a memory.
Ah, so you remember the high of the purchase.
You remember the temporary boost you associate it with the packet you bought, and that ensures you'll eventually return to the bazaar for the next shiny thing when you feel empty again. Desire, spark, dissatisfaction, repeat.
That's That's so wild. It's like a casino. The short-term motivation is just those small payouts that trick your brain into thinking the jackpot is coming.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
It reminds me of an analogy. It's like trying to hold water in your bare hands.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like the tighter you squeeze to try and keep it, the faster it just slips through your fingers. The very act of chasing the water and gripping it is what destroys your ability to hold it.
That is exactly it. You cannot capture a dynamic process. But the industry uses psychological levers to convince you that you can, and more importantly, that you have to do it quickly.
Right, the urgency.
Exactly. They manufacture the illusion of scarcity. You see those countdown timers on a webinar or only 3 spots left at the meditation retreat.
Oh, yeah, those drive me crazy.
But they work because they manufacture urgency to bypass your rational prefrontal cortex. It taps directly into your amygdala to make you feel like permanent happiness is this rare resource, and it's rapidly slipping away.
And when it does slip away, when the 30-day journaling habit fails, the industry completely shifts the blame, right?
Oh, absolutely. They don't say the product is flawed. They say you are flawed.
Right. You end up carrying all this guilt. You think, I just didn't journal hard enough. I didn't stick to the 5 a.m. wake-up time. I lacked discipline.
And that manufactured guilt feeds right back into the neurological loop. You feel inadequate, your baseline dips even lower than before, and your brain frantically searches for a new external solution to fix that internal deficit.
And when we feel that deficit and we're carrying around all this guilt from failing, we naturally start scanning our environment to see who is succeeding. We look for the people who actually managed to catch the water.
Or at least the people who appear to have caught it.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really fascinating part of the book, the illusion of happiness theater.
Yes. From an evolutionary psychology standpoint, when a tribe faces a resource deficit, and in this case we're talking about a deficit of emotional well-being members, are hardwired to look for dominant figures who have supposedly solved the scarcity problem.
We want to copy them so we can survive.
Exactly. We idolize them.
So in our modern theater, there's basically a cast of 3 main characters we idolize. First, you have the billionaire.
Right.
And they sell happiness as like a byproduct of relentless productivity. The freezing cold plunges, the optimized green juice, the biohacking.
The subtext there being that extreme discipline and wealth will somehow armor you against sadness.
Exactly. Then you have the second character, the influencer. They sell happiness as an aesthetic. It's the flawless yoga pose on a cliffside or the perfectly lit sunset on the beach.
You curated life.
Right. And finally, you have the monk. They sell happiness as total detachment. Saffron robe, sitting silently on a mountain, just this impenetrable, serene smile.
And we sit in the audience of this theater, painfully aware of our own messy, disorganized backstage reality. And we compare our backstage to their highly edited highlight reels.
Which is just a recipe for misery.
It is. Because if you actually deconstruct the baseline reality of these archetypes, the illusion just falls apart. The billionaire's biohacking routine doesn't stop their cortisol levels from spiking at 3 a.m. when the market crashes.
Right.
And the influencer, they're shivering in freezing weather, taking 20 different takes and yelling at a photographer to capture an authentic moment of peace.
It's all staged.
Their highlight reels are curated, but their baseline reality is just as misaligned and turbulent as ours.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I have to push back a little bit.
Sure.
Especially on the monk archetype. We have actual documented neuroscience showing different brainwave patterns in meditating monks.
That's right.
Like, their neural pathways are literally altered. So isn't a monk meditating on a mountain actually experiencing a fundamentally different kind of joy than a regular person who's just stuck in traffic?
Okay, that's a great distinction. The monk has absolutely trained their brain to lower its baseline reactivity. The stage they inhabit is quieter, and yes, their baseline stress is significantly reduced.
Right.
But, and this is the crucial part, the core biological mechanism of joy, that sudden resonant spark of happiness, it is biologically identical to yours.
Wait, really? The exact same?
The exact same. When a monk feels a moment of profound peace during a chant, their brain is executing the exact same neurochemical sequence as your brain does when, say, your favorite song unexpectedly comes on the radio.
Oh, wow.
The scale of their stress is different, sure, but the biological script for joy is exactly the same. They experience the same momentary ripples of joy as anyone else.
So why do we see them as these untouchable figures?
Because we desperately project the illusion of permanence onto them. We see their peaceful highlight reel, and we want to believe that someone, somewhere, has cracked the code. We want to believe their dopamine and serotonin are permanently locked in this euphoric state.
But they aren't.
No, nobody is.
So if nobody, not the billionaire, the influencer, or the monk, actually possesses this permanent, unbreakable happiness, what even is happiness?
Well, this is where Chavan introduces the core scientific framework of the book, universal energy dynamics, or UED.
Right. Let's get into UED.
So UED forces us to stop looking at happiness as a prize to be won and start looking at it as physics. Chavan frames human existence as this constant field of overlapping ripples.
Like ripples in a pond.
Exactly. Think of these ripples as your neural oscillations, the actual frequencies of your brain activity. You have internal ripples, which are your expectations, your needs, your fears.
Okay.
And then you are constantly bombarded by external ripples, your environment, your relationships, the sensory feedback of the world around you.
And most of the time, the pond is just chaotic. The ripples are totally misaligned. Like, you want a promotion, that's an internal ripple, but the economy is down. The frequencies just clash.
Precisely. But occasionally, the frequencies align perfectly. When your internal expectation matches the external reality, the peak of one wave lines up precisely with the peak of the other.
And what happens then?
In physics, that's called constructive interference. The two waves don't just coexist, they amplify each other into a much larger resonant wave.
And that structural resonance is what we actually experience as joy.
Yes, when your internal needs and external realities briefly lock into phase, your brain floods your system with serotonin and dopamine.
So it's literally just the feeling of laughing at a friend's joke or the smell of rain after a long day.
Exactly. It is a fleeting structural consequence of alignment.
You know, what I love about this is how incredibly democratic it is.
It really is.
I mean, the physics of the pond do not care about your bank account. A beggar laughing with a friend on the street experiences the exact same structural resonance, the exact same phase alignment as a billionaire eating at a Michelin star restaurant.
Perfectly said.
Mm-hmm.
Money and status just change the circumstances that create the ripples. Wealth can buy a nicer pond, so to speak, but it cannot alter the fundamental biology of the ripple itself.
And that leads to an obvious question. If happiness is just these ripples aligning, why can't we just engineer our lives so they stay aligned forever? Why can't we just hold the waves perfectly in sync?
Because you run straight into the biological and philosophical laws of impermanence. Look at the Buddhist concept of anicca, the truth, all things are in constant motion.
Right.
If the ripples in a pond stayed perfectly aligned forever, they would cease to be waves. The water would just go completely flat. Stillness isn't life, it's entropy. It's death.
Wow.
And biologically, if your brain somehow locked into a permanent state of joy, your dopamine receptors would drastically downregulate. You'd become numb.
So the fading of joy isn't a bug.
No, it's a feature. The fact that your joy fades isn't a failure of your discipline. It's proof that you are alive and adapting and in motion.
Okay, so if happiness is the constructive interference of these ripples aligning, what happens when they collide completely out of sync?
That's what we call destructive interference. When the peak of your internal expectation meets the trough of an external reality, the waves cancel each other out. And we experience that turbulence as stress, dissatisfaction, and sorrow.
So what does this all mean? Because it's really easy to sit here and call sorrow destructive interference on paper, but in real life, it hurts.
It does hurt.
How do we stop pathologizing our own sadness when modern culture is constantly telling us that feeling bad is a low vibe or a failure?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to completely reframe the biological utility of sadness. Pain, stress, dissatisfaction, these are vital survival mechanisms.
How so?
Without that painful gap between expectation and reality, there would be zero drive to grow or adapt. Emptiness isn't a void. It's a highly functional state.
Right, like the default mode network you mentioned in your notes earlier.
Exactly. When you are bored or feeling that empty, low vibe, your brain switches to the default mode network. That's where deep memory consolidation and problem solving happen.
I think the book is a great example of this. Isaac Newton.
Yes. Newton didn't discover the laws of gravity while he was at some hyper-productive leadership summit.
No, he made his biggest breakthroughs during the Great Plague. The university shut down, he was sent home, and he was plunged into this period of profound boredom and emptiness.
Destructive interference at its finest. His brain was forced into overdrive by the emptiness. We are so terrified of emptiness today. But emptiness is just the necessary pause between notes that makes music possible.
I love that.
If a song was just a continuous blast of sound with no pauses, it wouldn't be music. Joy cannot exist without the contrast of sorrow.
That is just profoundly liberating.
It really is.
If you're listening to this, I think the ultimate takeaway here is that you can finally step off the hedonic treadmill.
Absolutely.
By understanding that happiness is just a fleeting consequence, a momentary alignment of ripples, you can stop feeling guilty for your sorrow. You can stop chasing the illusions sold at the bazaar. Your boredom and your sadness aren't failures. They're the biological states that drive your growth.
And, the author leaves us with a final lingering thought to mull over, which I think perfectly captures this.
Oh, lay it on us.
He points out that dissatisfaction is the ultimate fuel for human evolution. So ask yourself this: if a pharmaceutical company actually did invent a magical pill tomorrow, one that gave us permanent, unbreakable happiness with absolutely no side effects, what incredible art, what life-saving inventions, and what beautiful human progress would we completely lose as a result?
Wow. It really makes you realize that the unpredictable, shifting turbulence of the water is exactly what makes the pond so beautiful to begin with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We'll catch you next time.